There is a painful truth that the world rarely acknowledges: intelligent people are often lonely. Not because they don't want to fit in, but because they can't pretend that the ordinary things make them happy. A highly intelligent person is like an eagle among sparrows, seeing further, hearing more clearly, feeling more deeply. But the price of seeing more clearly than others is that they can no longer live simply like the majority. A thoughtless word, a meaningless conversation, a noisy crowd, all of it exhausts them. It's not that they criticize others, but because their minds crave deeper levels, truths hidden behind a veneer of pretense. A person can only be himself fully when he is alone. That sentence is like a sharp knife cutting straight into the social illusion. We are taught to fit in, to be like others in order to be loved. But that requires us to sacrifice the most unique part of ourselves, our true selves. The wise do not accept that. They choose to be alone, not because they hate others, but because they love the truth within themselves more than all false praise. While others seek to kill time with entertainment, they quietly use their time to delve into their own selves. They do not think about how to entertain themselves, but about the meaning of existence. The difference seems small, but it creates a distance of thousands of miles between a conscious mind and a mind swept along by the crowd. You will see them quietly reading in a noisy coffee shop. They do not need to show off. They do not need to be seen. They live as if they are conversing with some invisible universe, where everything is profound, everything is worth thinking about. The wise do not seek solitude, they only avoid the noise of fools. They know that true worth lies not in the number of people around them, but in the quality of what they hold in their hearts. Wisdom makes them awake, and being awake is always a form of solitude. But in that solitude blossoms an incomparable freedom, freedom from the gaze of others, from the pressure to fit in, from the fear of being judged. Is it sad to live like that? Yes. But it is a sadness of depth, not a sadness of emptiness. It is a sadness that only souls who have stood at the abyss of knowledge can feel, and choose to move on. Because they know, loneliness does not kill them. It is the sacred ground, where wisdom takes root, where truth is heard, in silence. Life is not a joyful love song. It is like a dark symphony, where the main note is suffering, and joy, if any, is only a rare pause. We are born not to enjoy, but to struggle with the meaning of existence, a journey that is not pleasant, but extremely real. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. That seemingly harsh saying is a true reflection of human life. When there is nothing to make us suffer, we feel bored. When we look for something to escape boredom, we fall into fatigue, anxiety, and then suffering returns, like a silent law of the universe. It is our wanting to be happy that is the source of unhappiness. When we are young, we believe that happiness is a destination. We just need to try, just need to earn enough money, have love, have fame, then happiness will come as a reward. But the longer we live, the more we understand that true happiness is never permanent. It comes and goes like the wind, while suffering, even in its silent form, always lurks somewhere in the back of our minds. Why do we suffer? Not because life is too harsh, but because we expect it to be easy. It is expectations that disillusion us. It is comparison with others that makes us dissatisfied. And it is the desire to control the uncontrollable that makes us desperate. Suffering comes not only from adversity, but also from resistance to reality. We often think that the greatest danger is hunger, disease, or poverty. But in fact, the greatest unhappiness lies in inner dissatisfaction, the feeling of emptiness despite having everything. We see others laughing and think they are happy. But how many laughs are to hide an exhausted soul? How many people spend their whole lives just pretending to be okay? Sometimes, happiness is not having more, but suffering less. Not being hurt by anyone today is also a form of peace. Not being tormented by yourself and old thoughts is also a form of liberation. We are so busy chasing after big things that we forget that small peace is also a miracle. And then, at some point, you will understand suffering is not an enemy. It is a strict teacher, forcing us to look deeply into ourselves, to listen to the wounds we have hidden for too long. Suffering does not come to destroy you, it comes to wake you up. When you stop trying to be happy according to other people's definition, when you start to live slowly, accept that you are not perfect, that life is not fair, at that moment, a strange serenity will come. Not because you have conquered suffering, but because you have stopped seeing it as an enemy. In a world obsessed with money, status, fame, and success, there is one thing that stands quietly on the sidelines: health. It makes no noise. It makes no fuss. It makes no show. And so, people often forget about it. Until it leaves. We chase big dreams, mountains of ambition that have no top. We work ourselves to exhaustion, eat hastily, sleep less, try harder, as if the body were a perpetual motion machine. Only when a sharp pain pierces the chest, or an abnormal test result appears on our hands, do we suddenly realize nothing is more precious than a body without pain. A person who eats white rice with boiled vegetables but sleeps peacefully, breathes lightly, and has a steady heartbeat, may be happier than a king lying on a hospital bed surrounded by gold and silver. Because no one can enjoy anything if their body is screaming in pain. We often think that happiness lies in big things: buying a house, marrying the person we love, having great success. But perhaps true happiness begins when you wake up and don't feel tired. When you can walk without aching knees. When you laugh without having to catch your breath. When you see the sunlight without a headache. A healthy beggar is happier than a sick king. That saying is not a cliché, but a truth drawn from the suffering of thousands of people who have survived illness. You will never understand how important health is until you lose it. Some people spend their youth exchanging for money, then spend the rest of their lives using money to buy back health. But unfortunately, health is not a refundable commodity. There are losses that cannot be bought. A weakened heart. A damaged liver. A malignant cell that quietly grows. All of these can start from the days when you try a little harder. We must relearn how to live a way that does not put performance above emotion, deadlines above sleep, and achievements above peace. Because you cannot love deeply if you are exhausted. You cannot dream beyond if you are struggling to breathe. Health is the foundation of all good things. Without it, happiness is just a fantasy. With a strong body, even sitting under a tree can be heaven. With a sick body, even a castle is a velvet prison. So, don't wait until it's too late. Be grateful for your steady heartbeat, your gentle breathing, your legs that can still walk. Listen to your body as a sacred song, where every cell is singing. Because the greatest happiness, it turns out, is not having everything, but being healthy enough to enjoy the little things. We live in a noisy world. People talk. People argue. People show off. People mock, criticize, talk for the sake of it, talk to win. But amidst all this chaos, there is one thing that is becoming increasingly rare: real listening, and words worth saying. Wise people do not seek solitude, they only avoid the noise of fools. This is not a disdainful attitude, but an instinct for self-preservation. When a mind is deep enough, it cannot breathe in an environment of pretense, shallowness, and noise. Meaningless social conversations, empty flattery, cheap stories, all of these make a deep person feel as if they are being drained of life. We often mistakenly think that talking a lot means understanding. That speaking well is respectable. But in fact, the deeper a person is, the quieter he is. The more intelligent a person is, the more silent he is. Because they know that words, if not considered, can become a weapon. Every time we open our mouths, we make a choice. To heal or to hurt, to support or to tear down, to instill hope or to spread poison. Everyone can be heard, but not everyone is worth talking to. Not because we are arrogant, but because we understand time and energy are precious resources and should not be wasted on conversations that leave us empty, not full. There are conversations that leave you feeling more peaceful after they end. There are conversations that make you want to be alone. We live in a society where people talk too much, but understand too little. People crave to answer, but rarely truly listen. And then we are lonely in countless relationships, in thousands of conversations, because few people truly want to understand each other. Perhaps that is why silence becomes the language of great souls. Not because they don't know what to say, but because they have learned that not everything needs to be said. There are truths that, when spoken, will hurt others. There are understandings that should be kept to oneself. And there are feelings that, the more they are shared, the more vulnerable they become. Politeness is to people like warmth is to wax. A gentle word can melt even the hardest of hearts. On the contrary, a harsh word can leave a scar for life. So, between choosing right and being kind, choose being kind. In a world where everyone is fighting for the right to speak, be the one who knows the art of silence. Because silence is not an escape. It is a choice. A way to protect yourself, to listen more deeply, to observe more closely. And sometimes, silence is the strongest answer. We don't need to say much to be loved. We don't need to justify to be understood. Sometimes, just a sincere look, a gentle nod, or simply a quiet presence, is enough to make the person next to you feel less lonely. Because in the end, language is not words. True language is emotion, sincerity, the ability to connect without noise. There is a freedom that cannot be chained, that cannot be bought, that cannot be taken away by any power, that is the freedom of the mind. A person who truly thinks, who knows how to learn, who knows how to ask and answer himself, is a person who has escaped the invisible prison in which most of humanity lives, the prison of superficiality and dogma. Reading is thinking with someone else's head instead of your own. This sentence sounds cold, but it is a wake-up call for our age, where people consume knowledge like a pre-packaged product. People read a lot, but think little. They copy ideas, but do not ponder them. They remember information, but do not understand deeply. And so, they think they know, while in fact they are only wearing the cloak of knowledge, but inside they are empty. Real knowledge does not come from memorization, but from doubting. It sprouts when we start to question, when we dare to disbelieve what someone teaches just because they have power, have degrees, or have prestige. Knowledge only becomes light when it is questioned, overturned, pondered, and lived with. Otherwise, it is just a form of brainwashing dressed up as education. A person who truly learns never learns to be better than others. They learn to understand themselves. They learn to understand the world. And then, they learn to love more deeply. Because the more they know, the more they feel small. The more they understand, the more humble they feel. A true intellectual never shows off his knowledge, he lives with it silently, like living with a bright area in his soul, without needing to shine it out. Talent hits a target that no one else can hit. Genius hits a target that no one can see. That is the power of independent thinking. It does not come from school. It does not come from books. But from looking deeply into things that everyone sees but no one understands. True thinking is the ability to create new questions, not just answer old ones. We need to learn, not to live better in this society, but to not be swallowed up by it. Knowledge protects us from being blindly led. It helps us know when to believe, when to doubt. It teaches us to see the world without the prism of propaganda, prejudice, or fear. A person who thinks cannot be led. And that is the highest form of freedom. Not everyone who studies a lot is wise. And not everyone who reads a little is ignorant. Because learning is not about accumulating degrees, but about training the mind to see deeper, understand more broadly, and love more correctly. Learn, not to become a know-it-all. But to know when to be silent, when to speak up. When to engage, when to retreat. When to forgive, and when to walk away. Learning, ultimately, is about living mindfully. Fame, money, desire, three peaks that many people climb endlessly, until they fall and still don't know where they are going. People live, tired, exhausted, competing, comparing, competing, because of an illusion, the illusion that when we have more than others, we will be happy. But then what? When we have it, we thirst more. When we reach it, we feel it is not enough. And in the end, we become slaves to the very things we once dreamed of. Wealth is like seawater, the more you drink, the thirstier you become. It is true. The thirst of desire is never satisfied. When we have no money, we think, just a little. When we have a little, we say, if only a little more. And when we have a lot, we feel, still not as good as others. No one is as rich as the person you envy. And no one is as poor as the person who always feels lacking. Fame is the same. It does not feed the soul, it only feeds the ego. It makes us live under the gaze of others, controlled by applause, admiring glances, and empty compliments. But then what? One day, when no one cares about us anymore, we will realize that we do not know who we are, because we have lived our whole life to please others. Lust, the thing that makes us tremble with desire and collapse with emptiness. It promises satisfaction, but sows disappointment. It makes us think that pleasure is happiness, that conquest is love, that possession is enough. But it is all just a game of the ego. The more you win, the lonelier you become. To live happily is not to live in constant joy, but to live with less suffering. When we stop chasing more, we begin to see enough. When we stop envying, comparing, we can be grateful. And when we stop, in the middle of the race of money, fame, desire, we have the opportunity to ask ourselves, what are we living for? True happiness is knowing when to stop. Knowing where the point is when more will make you lose yourself. Knowing how to let go before your hands bleed from holding too tightly. Knowing that sometimes, just a simple meal, a loving look, a night of peaceful sleep, is more precious than mountains of money, a sea of cheers, or a short-lived ecstasy. This world is full of people who think they are successful, but live like a shadow of themselves. They may have everything, but they don't really enjoy anything. Because inside them, hunger never ends. But people who know enough, even if they live simply, can still hold their heads high and smile. Not because they have a lot, but because they don't need a lot to feel at peace. Fame is a dream. Money is a tool. Desire is a fire. They are not bad, but if they let them drive your life, you will soon lose your way. Let your soul be the master. Let your heart show the way. And remember, true wealth is when you no longer feel like you lack anything, even if you own nothing. Youth seems to last forever. Long sunny days, long nights full of dreams, hearts fluttering before the wide-open future. When we are young, we do not count time, because we believe we have our whole life ahead of us. We waste precious moments as if they will never run out, as if spring will never end. From the perspective of youth, life is an endless future. But from the perspective of old age, it is only a very short past. A silent but moving sentence like a bell ringing in the dark night. When we are young, we think life is a long journey. We can postpone everything: love, courage, forgiveness, or simply being true to ourselves. But time waits for no one. It quietly, persistently, patiently erodes each moment, until one day we look back and realize that we have gone through the most beautiful part of life without really living. Age does not come in a day. It comes like frost on the hair, like crow's feet at the corners of the eyes, like the quiet fatigue after each night of staying up late. But the sad thing is not that the body grows old, but that our souls lose the brilliance of youth. How many people grow old without ever growing up? How many people grow up without ever truly living? Life is like a book. The first 40 years are the text, the next 30 years are the commentary. But too many people do not have time to read the first part carefully before moving on to the last part, carrying with them many regrets, many unanswered questions. The irony is, when we understand the meaning of life, it is also the time when we no longer have enough strength to live it fully. Old age is not scary. What is scary is that old age comes and our hearts are still full of regret. For not living more courageously. For loving too late. For being silent when we should have spoken. For living according to a pattern, without once living according to the call of the heart. Time is fair, it gives everyone 24 hours a day. But how we use it will determine who we are, and what we leave behind in this world. Wise people do not fear age, because they understand, every wrinkle is a chapter of life. Every gray hair is a mark of love, loss, maturity. They do not cling to youth, they let it pass like a beautiful song that once sounded. They do not resent old age, they enter it with the serenity of those who understand, living wholeheartedly is true youth. Time is a strange gift. At first we think it is infinite, but in the end we see it is the most precious thing. Live so that when time runs out, we can smile, not because we are forever young, but because we have loved, lived, and burned brightly as ourselves. And if one day, when your hair is gray, your eyes are dim, your hands are shaking, you can say, I am no longer young, but I have lived fully, then time has taken nothing from you, but only given you eternity within. Kindness is not noisy. It does not need the spotlight, does not wait for praise. It exists like a silent light, warming people in the coldest days of the soul. Today's world praises intelligence, strategy, success. But then, we realize, a great mind without compassion is just a sharp blade that no one wants to hold. And a heart that knows how to vibrate, even if not talented, is still what makes a person beautiful. Compassion for animals reflects the character of a person. A person who is cruel to weak creatures cannot be kind to his fellow human beings. Because morality is not lofty teachings, it lies in how we treat weak, small, and unresponsive things. Kindness does not make people richer, more famous. But it makes the heart lighter, warmer, and more real. In a world full of competition and deception, kindness is like an act of going against the current. But that is why it becomes rare, like a small candle in the dark night, everyone who sees it is moved. Kindness is not always reciprocated. Sometimes it is even seen as weak, naive, or taken advantage of. But a truly good person is not good because they expect gratitude, but because they cannot live otherwise. Because in them, there is a kind of morality that is ingrained in their blood, that is not to hurt others, even if possible. Someone said, "What do you get by living well?" To be at peace. To look at yourself in the mirror without shame. To sleep without remorse. To be a human being without losing your humanity. Morality is not in books, but in everyday actions. In whether you keep the smallest promise, bend down to help a stranger pick up something that has fallen, to stay silent when your words will hurt someone. Those are the silent tests that life gives to human morality. Kindness does not distinguish between rich and poor, education, or status. A person may possess nothing, but as long as he knows how to love, he has a treasure in his heart. On the contrary, a person who has everything but lacks morality, then that wealth is just a layer of paint on an empty wall. Kindness is the deepest form of wisdom. Because only those who understand life well know that everything will pass, only the good things we sow in others will last forever. Morality is not something we need to show off, but something we need to keep even when no one is looking. Because human dignity does not lie in the moment of praise, but in the moment they choose correctly in silence. And in the end, when death comes knocking on the door, people cannot bring wealth or fame, but can only bring the kindness they have left behind. A timely hug. An unsolicited forgiveness. An anonymous good deed. That is the silent mark of a beautiful soul. Freedom is not just about not being bound. True freedom is when we are able to be true to ourselves, not a copy of someone else, not a product of social expectations. That is the deepest freedom, freedom from the fear of being judged, of being excluded, of being different. We lose 3/4 of ourselves just to become like others. A heartbreaking reminder. From a young age, we are taught to be like everyone else, to fit in, to do the right thing, and right here, often according to the majority standard. But we are not born to be a shadow. We are born to be ourselves, complete, different, without asking for permission. In a crowd, the bravest thing is sometimes not to fight or overcome adversity, but to dare to step out of the crowd and say, "I am me." That is not easy. Because being different often comes with loneliness. But the price of being yourself is always worth paying, rather than living a fake life just to be accepted. Smart people do not seek solitude, they just stay away from the noise of stupid people. The saying is sharp and true. Society is full of noise, from meaningless conversations, cheap judgments, to the pressure to be like everyone else. The wise do not criticize the crowd, they just silently walk towards peace, where they can think, create, and exist as themselves, without constraints, without acting. Whoever does not like solitude has never known freedom. Because freedom does not come from applause. It comes from inner peace, from not having to prove anything. When we can sit alone, without needing anyone's approval, without fear of being left behind, then we are touching the highest form of freedom. Difference is not something to be hidden. It is the special touch of creation on each soul. The world doesn't need more people who are the same, it needs people who dare to be authentic, who dare to think differently, who dare to walk their own path. And it is those people, those who are misunderstood, who are laughed at, who are called different, who are the ones who pave the way, who change the world, not the ones who follow. Freedom is never a gift. It is something you win from within, overcoming the fear of rejection, letting go of the need to please everyone, and having the courage to say no to what is not true to you. Every time you choose honesty over compromise, silence over competition, a different path even if it means being alone, you are living freely. Eagles don't fly with sparrows. People with identity don't need to make noise. They let their differences speak for themselves, by the way they live, love, think, and smile. The true self doesn't scream, it just quietly appears, but no one can ignore it. And in the end, when life fades away like a slow sunset, the thing we regret most will not be not being like everyone else, but not having the courage to be ourselves. We live as if we will live forever. We love, we rage, we fight as if everything will last forever. But then one day, death knocks on the door, without warning, without mercy, and the world we know is snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Death, no one can escape it. It does not choose age, status, or allegiance. It just comes. Quietly. Absolutely. But that very certainty makes us look back. What is life, after all? We can see our lives as a brief chaotic chapter in the endless silence of nothingness. Before us, there was nothing. After us, there will be nothing. The only thing that makes our presence meaningful is how we live between those two boundless silences. Every separation is a death in miniature. We say goodbye to those we love, to moments that will never return, and our hearts shrink. But it is in those separations that we learn that time is finite, and that love is the only thing that makes that finiteness worth living. We are not afraid of death, we are afraid of being forgotten. We are afraid that, when we are no longer here, what we are, what we love, what we strive for, will disappear like a dream. But that is the silent call of existence, to leave a trace. Not in stone, but in the hearts of others. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom, but right in between those two extremes, there are small but brilliant moments, a look of understanding, a hug when we are weak, a sentence that warms our hearts on a cold day. These are the little things that death cannot take away. Because they live forever in memories, in people's hearts, in the vibrations we leave behind. Perhaps the greatest consolation about death is that it makes everything in life precious. A sunny day, a windless afternoon, a handshake, knowing that we will not be here forever, everything becomes sacred. And who knows, the finite is what makes human life beautiful. After death, we will return to where we came from, a state of non-existence. But in that middle, the period we call life, if we have loved with all our heart, forgiven, helped someone stand up, been quietly kind, then we have truly existed. Death is not the end. It is a mirror reflecting life, for us to ask ourselves every day, are we living, or just existing? Are we present, or just passing by? And if life is a short song, don't let it pass by in silence. Let each note resonate with your heart. So that when death comes, we can smile and say, I lived. Not perfectly, but truly. Life is a finite journey, where death is not an enemy, but a mirror that allows us to live more deeply. In facing that fragility, we learn to cherish every moment, every person we love, every little thing that is easily forgotten. We realize that life is not about lasting longer, but about living more meaningfully. A kind word, a sincere action, a daring to be yourself once, all of those are traces we leave in life, things that remain even when we are no longer there. The greatest lesson from death, from time, from suffering or difference, is, live a life without regrets. Don't postpone love. Don't wait for perfection to start. Don't lose yourself just to be accepted. Because everyone will reach the end of the journey. But only a few people, when they reach there, can smile and say, I have lived truly, with all my heart.